Well, time for another episode of Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures. And today's guest has been an elite athlete since he left school at Xavier College in Melbourne in the leafy suburbs of Kew 10 years ago. He was a very good runner at school, a star in the APS events, of which Xavier have had a lot of success over the years. And this young man was a very good middle distance runner. He continued along that vein until he got injured. Then he thought, well, I like cycling. I'm going to try and become a pro road cyclist. And he had plenty of success and achieved a lot in that particular field as a pro cyclist, especially in overseas teams. And now he's decided he's going to retire from pro cycling. He's had a lot of injuries, but instead of just putting his feet up and maybe concentrating on a career outside sport, this young man has decided, I'm going to do triathlons. So he knows the running, he knows the cycling. Obviously, well, he can swim, but it's getting up to the level that I'm sure with his drive, with his determination, he'll be able to get there. I'm also going to say I've got a caveat on this. I'm related to his family. His father, Matthew, is my cousin, and it's a great pleasure to catch up with Jimmy Whelan on Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures. Jimmy, good to have you with us. And of course, I'm speaking to Jimmy live from his home in Barcelona. Welcome, mate.
Hey Dan, cheers for having me on.
It's
Yeah,
it's an
hi.
it's an absolute pleasure. I spoke about your dad and your mum, as you know. Your dad is my cousin, and he's always been really proud when he's spoken at Whelan family functions. And as you know, there's a lot of us, 29 first cousins, and we always get together. And he's been talking about your cycling career and your running career, and I've exchanged some texts, just getting a little bit more background on you. And your mum, of course, too, Judy, is outstanding as well. How much of a support have they been in your career so far, Jimmy?
Huge, really. I definitely wouldn't be, here, having been an athlete for 10 years without their support. Um, Through primary school and all the way through high school, they saw that I was good at sport and they really supported me in that way, so that doors and opportunities would come. And they sent me to a really good school, but they also sent me to really good sporting clubs in different sports, so I could kind of hone in on this sporting ability that I had and fall in love with being an athlete. So yeah, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be living in Barcelona and traveling the world and meeting all these cool people, doing cool things. Uh, yeah, they definitely were super important. So shout out to mum and dad. Yeah.
Was it always running at school?
No, when I was younger, through primary school, I was actually really good at tennis.
Right.
So I was doing a lot of tennis. That was can't remember exactly how much training I was doing, but I was competing at the state level and doing quite a lot of coaching. And I was definitely quite good at it, but um, actually fell out of the sport following some politics with parents getting involved in matches at local tennis matches. So I thought I want to stop this, and so I went into soccer. Um, and yeah, great. I was pretty good at soccer too. And then I was a bit too small. I felt like I was getting thrown around a bit too much. I was a pretty small kid when I was younger. I wasn't that tall, and I was a pretty small frame. And playing against some of the bigger guys that felt like men compared to me, I ended up uh, going into running. Yeah, I could always run pretty well on the soccer field, and I was always on the wing. And yeah, I when I went to Xavier in year 7, I then really knuckled down into my running ability and yeah, I also did a little athletics with Boxall Athletics Club. That's on a Saturday morning, so that really got me going a bit and kind of uh, yeah, fell in love with running and found some mates that I'm still best mates with now from those days. So, um, but yeah, I guess the my first kind of serious moment where I thought, okay, I actually want to be an athlete was and uh, into my adult years was probably when I was a runner in year seven and eight, when I was doing middle distance and cross country with Xavier College. So
You,
um,
you talked about the tennis and you talked about the
yeah.
politics, parents getting involved. Still seems to be a major issue, doesn't it? I mean, even at the elite level. Why do you think that's the case, Joe? Jimmy, sorry.
I don't know. I think I mean it's a problem. It's not an Australian problem. It's a problem
Ah,
amongst the sport. I hear even in Spain or in everywhere. Like the it's a pretty high. Like these parents, they'll send their kids to practice like 10 times a week. Um, hoping that they become the next Rafa Nadal. And yeah, I think they try and get involved. They get a bit too invested, and sometimes people can want to see their little Billy do better than yeah, better than what he's capable of, and so they get involved and kind of get involved with the referees or the umpires, and yeah, it can change the game a little bit. So that's what happened in my case, which was now that I look back at it, it's actually super disappointing. But I'm sure it's still the case,
it is.
and it's just how it is until they go professional, I guess. So um, yeah, these sports where kids can kind of go professional quite early. Some elite tennis players are 17, 18 years old, practicing playing on the world tour. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of pressure applied when they're younger, 14, 15, because they're only a step away from being that full professional traveling the world. And it's the same deal with soccer as well. Yeah, I felt a little bit of that. Not quite as bad, but the main reason why I stopped soccer was I was just too small. I would have been 40 kilos or something. Yeah.
Well, what about cricket and footy? No interest in playing it?
All my mates played footy on a Friday night,
Yeah.
and I did play with them every now and again. It was nice because I felt like I was missing out in that regard. So I joined the cricket team there, but I didn't enjoy just staying still on the field. So I wanted to move around. I can see why people like cricket, that's for sure, but I wasn't very good at it. Um, yeah, my patience in the game wasn't that great. But and then I also played a bit of footy, AFL. So, but I preferred soccer. So I did Auskick when I was younger, because all my mates were there and these things. But that was when I was really really little. So, but I think I could have been good at AFL. My only thing going through high school was that I was always quite small, and yeah, too fine to play a contact sport. So um, yeah, I stuck to what I knew and what I was good at, and that was running in the end.
Well, I mean, you've certainly got the endurance. Where did you get your sporting? I think I know the answer to this. Where did you get your sporting prowess from? The Whelans or the Kennedys?
Well, you never know, do you?
Oh,
And you never
oh,
really
I know,
know.
I know the answer to this. Sorry, Matthew.
Yeah, sorry, Dad. I think it's definitely from the Kennedy side. My mum was a really good runner,
Yes, I heard that.
um, exceptional runner. Some of the times that she was running when she was little is still to this day really, really fast. So yeah, definitely from my mum's side. But maybe I mean, obviously there's clearly the Whelan genes didn't cause any problems either. So um, yeah.
Now, your mum, was she a sprinter or a middle distance runner like yourself?
Mum was doing 800 meters, so that was her specialty, but she did it quite young. But her times were up there with Australia's highest at that age. So um, yeah, I think I got it from her, and then I think a lot of it's also, I mean, you need genetics, but a lot of it ends up being environmental. So you go to a good sport that likes sport, a good school that likes sport, and then all of a sudden all your mates are playing sport, and then it kind of builds from there. So I think also when you play a lot of sport when you're younger, it kind of fine tunes your body to be efficient at doing whatever you're doing from a young age. So I was certainly like looking back at it, I was doing a lot of sport, like training heaps. Whether that was in one sport or another, or doing two sports at once, plus school, running around like crazy at during lunchtimes. Like I was clocking up a lot of time on my feet, and I think that also helped to build the engine a little bit.
Are you an organised person? You seem like you are.
Yeah, I think so. You kind of have to be now that I'm living out of home for a long time now. You kind of have to be super organized. Like you need to, as an athlete, you need to have things pretty dialed so that you don't have too many stresses going on around you. So yeah, yeah, I'd say I'm pretty organized. So some athletes aren't, and but I am. So yeah.
Jimmy Whelan is my guest on Dashing Down Sporting Adventures. He's been a pro cyclist on the road and had a lot of success in Australia and also overseas. He was a runner growing up as well and had success as a middle distance runner, and now he's decided to concentrate on being a triathlete. Jimmy, 800, 1500 metres, you did well at school at Xavier College. I mentioned earlier the cauldron of the APS. What was that experience like?
That was a super cool experience. If someone is to ask me what is the my like favorite 3 minutes of sport throughout my year, it would have to be uh, the 1500 meter APS final, and I had all my mates. The whole, you have a couple of hundred mates from school all cheering you on, yelling your name, and you're going around the track, and you're going to win, and yeah, it had everyone cheering my name in a song. That was probably like the biggest goosebumps moment I've had in sport, to be honest. So yeah, that APS 800 and 1500 and just that day in general made me fall in love with running even more. And kind of after that day, I then made a priority to myself to try and make this my job. Um, Whether it was running or being an athlete, I thought it was running at the time. And I thought it was the end of the world when running finished, but it was borderline the best thing that ever happened to me. But we can get onto that later. But yeah, it was pretty special just to run and win in front of your family, your friends, your school. Yeah.
Where was the event held? Because I would have thought by then, excuse my ignorance, obviously Olympic Park was gone and Collingwood had taken it over. Where was the APS finals held then?
Yeah, so Olympic Park was taken over by Collingwood
Yeah.
3 years prior to that happening.
Yes. Yeah.
So uh, it had been at APS for 3 years at Albert Park
Oh,
Stadium. So the blue athletics track.
yeah.
Um, I do miss that track, the Olympic Park. I must say that was a really cool stadium. But yeah, it's also a nice oval now too, so that'll do. And my old man plays for barracks for Collingwood, so I won't rip on Collingwood for destroying an athletics track too much.
Are you a Collingwood supporter? Because half your family, I mean, your late grandfather, as you know, he was a mad Miles. He was a mad Carlton supporter. Your Uncle Patrick's a Carlton supporter. Jared's a Carlton supporter. But Milo and Matthew are both Collingwood supporters. I mean, I don't get it how half could be supporting one team and the other half supporting the other team that both hate each other. What about you, Jimmy?
I I don't follow the footy too much
Right,
now, particularly now that I'm away for the season. I haven't seen a football match in a long time. But I do go for Collingwood,
right.
but very from a distance. Um, but yeah, when I was in Melbourne, I definitely barracked for Collingwood. So, and my old man barracks for Collingwood, so we'll keep it like that.
Yeah, he certainly
Um,
does. Yeah,
and I think it's good within a family to have a few different supporting teams. Keeps a bit of spice going on. So it's good. Yeah.
yeah. Well, there's an Essendon interest amongst our cousins as well on Bulldogs. I've got a brother Hawthorn. There's a cousin married to a Melbourne supporter. So whenever we have functions in the middle of winter, footy's always
Yeah.
a topic of conversation. So and there's so many
Yeah.
teams. across the board. So in the APS, it is like an amphitheatre, isn't it? When you've got the Xavier boys cheering, and I had been in the crowd a few times, many, many moons ago, being a Xavier boy. What sort of impact did that have on you to perform well and get over the line, knowing you've got your schoolmates right behind you?
Yeah, running's or athletics anyway. It's kind of a funny sport. Like it's not like football where everyone talks or cares about it all year. And so when you're a runner, you're kind of knuckling down quietly without too many people checking in about it at school. And then you finally have this one day where all your mates are there cheering for you. There's a bit of hype that's been leading up for a week. And I knew that week that I could win the events because I was in amazing condition and I'd done the work. And that was the first time where I'd ever done a training block where I thought, okay, that was actually really professional and I've done a lot of work and I'm in the position to win the 800 and the 1500 and win it by a bit, I think. Um, so yeah, I had a bit of pressure on myself, and when I got halfway through the 1500, I had a pretty good gap on everyone and kind of knew that I was going to win the thing. So I basically had two laps with 300 Xavier boys cheering, my name, and I could really take it in, which was really quite special. Normally in a running race, you can't, or in a cycling race, or in most sports, you can't really take it in until the last moment. But I was able to enjoy, 2 minutes of the athletics track. All felt like all to myself with everyone cheering me. It was a pretty cool experience and something I'll never forget. That's for sure. Um,
How different are the two events to train for, Jimmy? The 800 and the 1500.
they're kind of similar. At that level, you're not talking in the APS stuff. You're not talking world class elite standards. So the difference in training required for the 15 and the 8 are kind of similar. The difference between a 1500 and a 5,000 meters is huge. You need speed work. So, um, but if you want to run a good 1500, you need to be able to do a good 3K time. And if you want to run a good 800, you need to be able to do a pretty quick 400. So, um, yeah, it's the training's quite similar. Yeah, you actually need to be quite fast. So lots of 300-meter reps at full speed. That was my classic with 100 meters jog in between and do that 10 times down at the grass athletics track at Xavier. So yeah, and also a fair bit of gym too. You need to be quite strong to do an 800 and 1500. Um, yeah, it's quite like muscular endurance based. So.
So you finished school, decided you wanted to have a career in middle distance athletics. Now you did compete in the Zatopek, not the actual Zatopek race, but an event at the Zatopek. Explain that experience for us. No doubt, and your dad told me he was there, and I presume your mum was there as well. That would have been a great experience for you.
Yeah, yeah. For those that don't know the Zatopek, I guess it's kind of Melbourne's premier distance track event. So you have all the different age groups, and then you have the elite men's and women's 10,000 meter Australian championships, and that's kind of the grand final in the evening. And yeah, there's also the under 23,000 meters, which is the Australian juniors 3,000 meter championships. And normally that race is a scouting race for colleges to pick up Australian athletes to give a runner like myself or someone who comes in the top five a scholarship to go to a college in America and to do their running scene there, which is huge. So it's kind of a big deal. The middle distance guys coming through from high school, and then when you finish high school, you then have this next goal to do the Zatopek, and everyone wants to go to college, and that's their dream as a runner. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal. And when I competed the way I did at the APS, I then thought, okay, my next big goal will be the Zatopek at 3,000, and Yeah, I ran a really nice time. I think I can't remember exactly where I finished. Maybe fifth. I can't remember exactly, but some of the boys in front of me are professional runners still today. Um, like they were in Paris for the Olympics. So yeah, it was in good company. And I actually didn't do that much training for that. I mean, I did a little bit of training, but I wasn't training like the guys I was competing against. Now that I look back on it, and the time I was able to hit based off the training I was doing kind of showed that I do have this pretty pretty elite running ability. And yeah, that's why it's interesting to now tap back into it again, which I'm really excited to do. So yeah.
Did you have a college that you would love to have gone to? Or at the end of the day, is it a bit like the draft, whether it be in the NBA or the NFL or even the AFL, that if a college picks you, you just go to that college? You're not really too fast. You're just happy to be in the system.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to win the Zatopek and you were doing really fast times, like breaking national records, you would most likely go to Stanford or you'd go to Oregon, um, or you could also choose whatever college you wanted to go to. Or if you're in my situation, you would have a few colleges send emails, and smaller colleges, and then you could pick from there. So yeah, I couldn't pick the big ones, but um, could have gone to like Florida Gators, for example, or to Arizona University. Um, but yeah, in the end, it didn't happen. And yeah, I got injured closely after the Zadebek, which meant that I couldn't put more multiple training sessions together, and I was having a bit of a rough time with running. So in the end, I uh, couldn't go to college and continue my running the way I wanted to. So um, yeah, went into cycling. So
Jimmy Whelan has joined me on Dashing Dan Sporting Adventures. So, if you can, without mentioning the war too much, so you'd actually got into a college, you were going to go, and then the injury happened. And how bad was the injury? Obviously, bad enough.
yeah, it wasn't confirmed at all that I was going to college. I just had a few colleges contacting me. We were shooting emails, and I was speaking with my coach. So it was still umming and ahhing about it. I wasn't sure what degree to do at the college, for example. So I still needed to make that decision. But then, yeah, then I got quite heavily injured with an Achilles problem. Um, and yeah, kind of like stayed around for 6 months. And the main issue was because I was growing so fast.
Right.
Um, I was a bit of a late grower after year 12, or in year 12 and into first year university. Um, and so I had some growing pains, and yeah, some of my tendons couldn't keep up with everything going on, and then also you know, training and destroying the legs every day didn't help either. So um, yeah.
How frustrating did it become for you, Jimmy? Did you think your sporting career was eroding before your eyes, considering you'd given up so much time for it and were so focused on it?
Yeah, like when you're a runner or any athlete doing any sport, if you lose the ability to do that sport, you lose your sense of worth and your identity. Um, so I really thought when I was 19 or 20, like I couldn't run anymore, and I felt like I'd lost my identity, as I said, and kind of what I'm known for. And so I felt a little bit lost. Didn't really know what to do. I put my head down at my university that I was going to, at RMIT, and got stuck into that, and actually just didn't do many sports for 6 months. Just put my feet up for the first time. Kind of enjoyed being a 19, 20-year-old. So that was also nice because it needs to be done. Um, so I got to spend some more times with mates and yeah, live my younger years the way most do. But then I started to yeah just not feel like myself. So I started riding a bike and just locally. Uh, and my old man was a cyclist at the time. He would ride on the weekends, and so I kind of was aware of the sport. And yeah, one of my best mates from school, he was a triathlete and would do some of the local races in Melbourne. And he said for me to come down and check it out. And I did one of the races, and he saw how capable I was off little training, and he said, "Well, if running is no longer your thing, you should put your energy into cycling. If you put the energy that you put into your running and put that into your bike riding, you could be really good." Um, and all of a sudden, I was on a nice bike, on a nice team, racing the National Road Series, and winning stuff super quickly, which was really enjoyable, and yeah, it was a new identity for me, which was nice because I felt like I'd lost my running title.
Why do you think it happened so quickly? You're just a natural at it?
Yeah, I also uh, put go all in when I start enjoying something.
Yeah.
So that's what makes me a good runner is I would train a lot and I didn't feel like I was doing a lot of training because I would just enjoy it. I'd enjoy the process. And it was the same with cycling. So I mean these sports they're still skill based and you still need good genes, but you need to work hard. And if you are the right personality where that hard work just comes natural, then you can actually excel quite quickly. Um, And luckily in Melbourne, in the sporting scene, there's lots of people that help out young talent and will identify you before you even realize yourself. So I owe, yeah, my career to a lot of people from back home at the local club and also just, yeah, people showing me the path to go to a local team. And if you did well at that local team, then there's a path after that to go international and then to Europe. So, um, yeah, I just well, back to your question. I think yeah, I just enjoy the training, and it doesn't feel like I'm doing a lot of training when some people would say that I'm training a lot. So um, yeah,
Who was the local club?
I joined Hawthorn Cycling Club. So there's the Hawthorn
They're a
Village.
massive club, aren't they? Because we at Game
Yeah,
Fights years ago did the junior cycling championships at the Northcote Velodrome, and there was Hawthorn, and there was McKinnon, and there was Ballarat. And we know what a huge cycling town Bendigo is with the gold medalist Scott McGrory, who still lives there and is heavily involved in cycling up there. So there are some massive clubs in Victoria, Melbourne, and outside Victoria that have developed a lot of young cyclists, haven't they?
yeah. The Melbourne's got a huge cycling scene, and a lot of that is due to the local clubs that, um, yeah, get kids on bikes and they end up racing and yeah, there's so many pros that have come through the grassroots cycling in Melbourne and yeah, in out of Victoria. That yeah, it's all thanks to these clubs. So luckily in my club at the Hawthorn Cycling Club, they were doing a race every Wednesday night, and that is kind of a breeding ground for young Australian talent to get identified. And if you're good at this crit, then everything suggests that you can become a really good cyclist, and that's what happened. So.
When did you know you were going to be really good? Was there a light bulb moment?
Yeah, I in my first year of cycling, so I started training in January, February 2017, more or less. And then at the end of 2017, I entered the Tour of Tasmania, which is Australia's biggest stage race in the National Road Series. Um, and I entered that as an individual. And there's a lot of teams there, and it's a pretty prestigious race to win. And I nearly won it as an individual rider without a team. I was actually in the jersey until until the very last day without any team support. And so at that moment, I realized, okay, I had a lot of people seeing what I did, and they saw that I was an individual leading Australia's biggest stage race at the time on the National Road Series, and I thought, okay, this guy can be really good. So I had some people from Cycling Australia contact me, and a few owners of teams to try and get me on their team, and then yeah, I ended up. From there coming second in the Australian under 23 road race, and that was the first big result that confirmed uh, that I could race in Europe and make this a job. Um, so yeah.
Wasn't there a race just before then? Your dad's told me about this that you drove up yourself up to Canberra and he flew up to
Mm.
Canberra and it was his first experience of watching cycling. And you see you go around once, and then you help out at the drink and food stations. See you go around again, and that's sort of it. How different it was to running. And you drove back with him, and I think you finished mid 30s. And you said, "Dad, I'll win this race next time round," and you did.
Yeah, I did actually. You're right. I forgot about that. Yeah, in 2017, it was the Oceania road race.
Yeah.
Um, but quite a big one. Again, one of the biggest one day races on the calendar for Australian racing. And yeah, it was in Canberra, so we drove down and um, looking back at it, I had no idea how to race a bike, but I was fit because of the training that I'd done. And yeah, uh, went back the next year and won it. So yep. Yeah, Dad wasn't. I wasn't wrong when I told Dad that, so that was pretty cool. Um,
What was his reaction? I mean, obviously he's a very supportive father, as we've seen many times in long discussions with him. But did he think that you could do it? Obviously, he would back you the best he could. Did you honestly think you could do it? You did think that, did you?
yeah, I did. Yeah, yeah. I think it was because of uh, yeah, I don't know. I think just what I was doing in the local races at the crits, I saw that I was beating the guys that were winning those things. And I knew that if I did the volume and did the training back home, quietly do the training, I could rock up to a race and I wouldn't be marked very well from a tactical perspective, and I'd be able to get into a few moves that maybe I wouldn't be normally allowed to get into. And yeah, I've never been shy of believing in something that I can do in an endurance sport. If I see that I more or less have the physical ability, and I just need to apply work ethic and training, then I think I can do it. So, um, and history suggests that I can shoot my shot and pull it off. So, yeah.
Former elite pro road cyclist Jimmy Whelan, he's now going to become a triathlete, is my guest on Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures. Do you think self-confidence is ingrained? Are you born with it, Jimmy, or is it something you develop as you go along your elite sporting journey?
Um, it's definitely something you develop, that's for sure. Like going through school, I didn't have the this kind of approach to doing things, and I think with sport, things are so quantifiable, and the work you do is so obvious to yourself, and you really see the results. Um, and yeah, if you when I put the processes down and I do the hard work, and then I try and get the result that I need, then I often pull it off, which is really cool. And so, uh, yeah, you just end up having this idea in your head that if you put all the pieces together, then you can achieve what you can achieve. So what you want to achieve. Um, and yeah, luckily in endurance sports, like the processes can be really simple and the outcomes can be quite tangible. So uh, yeah, definitely something. Yeah, going through high school I didn't have, but basically since the APS event, I've kind of changed in that way of believing in myself and these things. So.
Obviously, you got into an Australian team, as you mentioned, and then the next aim would be to go overseas and see if you can get into an international team, and you achieved that between 2019 and 2021. Must have been, again, like a dream come true to be rubbing shoulders with some of the best overseas cyclists and some of the best events, including the Giro d'Italia. How good would have that been?
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, the coolest thing about cycling is that it's a European sport, so you're traveling all around the world. You're going to America as well. You're going to Japan, and yeah, you're racing against some of the most prestigious athletes in the world, and also some of you're racing in history. And cycling is such an old sport. It's one of Europeans' favorite sports, and yeah, being able to do a Grand Tour in 2020 to do the Giro was incredible. And yeah, I have some pictures and memorabilia from that race that will be hanging in my my uh, my garage for a long time. So um, yeah, it's cycling is a beautiful sport just in terms of training and being able to enjoy the outdoors and where you live, but also the sporting side of things with the competitions, just where you can go, the people you meet. It's yeah, it's pretty cool, and I'm really lucky to have done it. So
The initial reaction when you were selected to be part of an international team, what was that feeling like?
it all happened really fast because when I came second in the Australian road race in 2018, I was then selected for the Australian team, and I travelled to Europe 2 months after that national championships, and I had entered the one of the under 23 one-day races, the Ronde van Vlaanderen, which is arguably the biggest one-day race on the calendar for under 23s. And it was my first European race, and I actually won it. And so that next day, I had my agent being contacted by quite a few teams talking about, uh, yeah, a 2 or 3 year contract to be sorted there and then. So within the space of a few months, I had gone from just racing local races in Australia to all of a sudden uh, being told about this contract that I need to sign, and I didn't quite understand what I was signing or the lifestyle was involved. Of course, it was a dream come true, but I didn't really understand. Like I was still so new to the sport that um, I didn't quite comprehend what I was signing up for, which was yeah, a pretty cool life, and yeah, so.
No doubt you would have done your due diligence with your family to make sure that you understood every single aspect. And was it everything you thought and more once you got the hang of it all, Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, I understood the lifestyle side of things, and that was so appealing to me, and that's why I enjoyed doing cycling and having the idea of going pro was to live in Europe, travel to races, and that was all amazing. One thing that I wasn't aware of was the the skill and technical aspect to the sport is so high at in the pro ranks in Europe, and so like I'd never raced down an alpine descent before, or I'd never thrown my bike around in a peloton of 200 guys going down into a sharp corner to a finish line. So that was jumping into the deep end. But other than that, um, I was pretty well equipped to take the opportunity. So yeah.
And how did you get an agent? How hard is that process for a pro cyclist who's in the infancy of his or her career?
Yeah, I mean, Australian cyclists are regarded as one of the top athletes in the sport at the moment, and when I started too. So, agents from Europe are always trying to create connections with athletes going through the local scene in Australia. And so, yeah, they get in. Basically, the agent will get in touch with the team that you're associated with, and if you do well at the Australian Nationals, then normally you get put on the books with an agency, and that's as simple as that. So. Um, yeah, and then from there, if you get a result further on into the Australian team in Europe, then they can start talking to teams about putting a proper contract together. So that's how that works.
Now, you mentioned so early in your career you represented Australia, won that race in Belgium. You must have been absolutely over the moon to be able to represent your country so early in your cycling career.
Yeah, it was amazing. Um, yeah, it was like just to be there in March in the cold of the winter in Belgium with the Australian with the green and gold on, racing against the Belgians and Norwegians. It was pretty cool, and I was also with one of my good mates at the time who was also in the team, so I got to share that with him. Um, and yeah, it was a dream come true when I was finally in Europe because you watch on television all these races, and then all of a sudden you go on your own bike riding the roads before the race, and it's pretty surreal. Um, and it was even more bizarre when I won my first race there, and I didn't quite when I won it, I didn't quite understand what it would change and what that win would do for me. I just thought I was winning another bike race, and I'd just get a few more kudos on Strava than normal. Um, but yeah, yeah, at the time, like when I was winning, I didn't quite understand that it would open up yeah, me living in Europe full time and going to some of the biggest races in the world. So I'm glad yeah, was selected for that team because it opened up the opportunity.
It's not a bad place to live, Jimmy, is it? I mean, Europe, you're so close to everything, aren't you? You're in Barcelona now, and Of course, France on your doorstep, Italy on your doorstep, London's not far away. It's magnificent.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's really cool. You can go. Yeah, I mean, I don't get to enjoy many holidays as such because I'm always training. So you got to live the simple life. But every now and again, I'm able to travel around, and it's so easy to yeah go to Italy or um, yeah. But normally, I'm just traveling around Europe for work or for bike races. Um, so yeah.
How disciplined are you? You seem extremely disciplined. I remember watching that magnificent race where you did a great job. You led for a long time in Ballarat years ago now, and we were hoping. My brother and I were watching it. Tim and another brother Stephen were on the text, and I think we were texting your uncle Patrick and a few of the other cousins saying, "Watch Jimmy, he's going magnificently here." I mean, you are disciplined. You don't seem to have an ounce of fat on you. I mean, how disciplined do you have to be, particularly with your eating and obviously with your training regime in general?
Yeah, cycling is a really tough sport. Uh, you have to love it because the work involved is huge. Um, and it's not just the work on the bike, it's also the life that you create off the bike. You have to say no to a lot of things. You really do have to live quite a simple existence in order to be an elite athlete at the world level. So yeah, when I'm bike riding, I'm doing up to 30 hours, 28 hours on average a week. So that's 5 big training days a week and 2 easy days. And then you also have gym, then you also have sauna, then you also need to have time on the couch. You need to have massage, physio. Like the training is really full on. And then you also need to stay organized with everything and deal with all the travel too. That needs to become something that you get need to get used to from a performance perspective. So and yeah, and also the food as well. So yeah, you have to. I mean, cycling is a sport about physics, so you need a strong engine, and then you also need a pretty light frame. So yeah, you have to be pretty disciplined with the work you put in training, but also the work that you put in with your food and everything in that regard. So it's a 24/7 job, and yeah, but it doesn't feel like a job to me. I know there's definitely some guys in the sport that are natural freaks and they don't enjoy doing the training and everything, but uh, they enjoy getting the success every now and again, and it's a real grind for them to have to do the work necessary in order to get there. So I'm quite lucky that the discipline comes quite natural. Um, but yeah, if anything, I need to learn to relax a little bit more in the off season and just turn the switches off. But when it's time to work, it's when I'm in my honey hole. So yeah,
So are you working on that in regard to switching off? And
yeah.
what other interests do you have to help you switch off?
I don't have that many other interests to be honest.
Are your
I mean,
parents onto you about finding other interests? Your girlfriend, your lovely girlfriend,
yeah,
you
yeah,
over in
yeah,
Barcelona onto you about finding other interests?
yeah. I mean, yeah, my girlfriend Claudia, uh, she definitely sees that when I need to chill out, she helps me just to enjoy the days here in Barcelona. It's a pretty nice place to be when you're not training. So you can go to nice cafes, you can go to the beach. Um, I mean, one of my hobbies is cooking good food. Um, so I enjoy cooking for people. So if we have friends come over, I'll tell them to come over for lunch and yeah, prepare a meal or that's what I enjoy doing too. So um, but I mean, I guess the main reason why I don't have a hobby is because when I'm doing my job, I don't have time to do anything else. And that's 11 months of the year. So I do find myself a month of the year twiddling my thumbs, waiting for that 1 month to close to get my teeth stuck into the new season. Um, so yeah,
You're worried though about not being mentally cooked, Jimmy. That's the key, isn't it? I mean, that's what
yeah,
relaxation and having other interests are a bit, isn't it?
yeah. No, you're definitely right. Like in endurance sports and at the top level, guys really do burn themselves out, especially if in a sport where it often goes wrong. Better, like you often don't win. Like to win is quite rare, and to have success is is often far away. So when you do all the work and it's just not quite going for you, you can put yourself into quite a rut and burn yourself out. Um, but luckily for me, I do just genuinely love training. Like it makes me happy. Like genuinely, it's like relaxing for me. So it's never felt like a grind. So there's definitely some athletes, as I was saying, that it's their sense of identity. It's what pays the bills, and they have to do the work in order to support their family and everything. And that's when it becomes quite tough and mentally a big stress when you're putting your leg over the bike every morning and you have to go do 5, 6 hours in the rain. If you're not loving it naturally, then that can become a mental challenge and you can have some serious burnout. But yeah, luckily for me, every off season I go back to Australia and I go back home. It's a, like I consider myself so lucky to be here in Barcelona, living the life I do, and then when I can, I flick the switches and I go back home to Melbourne, to the leafy suburbs of Hawthorn, and it's a great place to be. It's one of the best parts of the world, and having seen so much traveling where I've been, makes me realize how amazing Melbourne is. And I don't think I would have ever had that perspective if I had have just knuckled down in Melbourne. And so, yeah, it's a privilege to go home every year to home. So I'll be doing that in a month actually. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, hopefully, at one of the Whelan functions, we'll get the opportunity to have a chat. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's a story for another day. Favorite dish you like to cook? If you had to cook something for your life, Jimmy, what would you cook?
Oh, I really like breakfast foods, which is a bit
Really?
boring and not really a proper dish, but the type of stuff that's served up at cafes, I guess. Um, but I just if, for example, if I invite friends over to the home in Australia, I love just putting up a big barbecue with good grilled veggies, nice salmon or whatever I've got from the market. So stuff like that. Um, and yeah, pretty simple, but nothing elaborate. I wouldn't call myself a chef, but I do enjoy cooking. I guess there's a big difference. Um, so yeah.
Absolutely. Jimmy Whelan is my guest. He's an ex-pro international cyclist, had a lot of success. He's now concentrating on triathlons. We'll get to that aspect of his story on Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures, the podcast. You can get on numerous social media apps and social media platforms. Obviously an opportunity there to get involved and have a listen to an outstanding story of a very talented young man. Now, you were talking, Jimmy, before about being in a team in pro cycling. What's it like being in a team? Is it dog eat dog, or you're given specific roles? It's interesting when you watch a race, you watch the Tour de France, the Giro d'Italia, and obviously even the Olympic Games, where you've got people in the peloton, and obviously there'll be a couple of athletes in your team or from your country that will be given the job of maybe being the best chances to win. I mean, what's the dynamics like there?
Yeah, it's interesting because in a game of footy, uh, at the end of when the siren sounds, the team wins, right? But in cycling, you have 7 riders on a team in a race against 22 other teams, and you only really have one winner from that race of all the teams. So yeah, it becomes a pretty interesting dynamic within the squads. You have 30 riders, and within that squad, you'll have maybe 6 or 7 guys that are on paper contracted to win bike races, and then the rest of the boys are contracted to assist those guys to win the bike races. And maybe every now and again, you'll get your own chance, depending on how the tactics play out, to get a result for yourself. However, the tactical plan for the team is to have, two main riders and then you have 5 helpers. And so it does get a bit complicated because if you're on contract and you've been doing your work for your teammate, it's difficult to quantify that, and it's not often obvious. So if for whatever reason your team doesn't renew your contract at the end of the season, and you've been doing work for someone else for the whole year, to then go to another team and say, "Hey, I'm a good bike rider," it, and it's difficult to show anything on paper. There's nothing obvious to show of that. Then it can become an interesting dynamic on the team bus. However, the sport is so professional now that, and there's so many good riders that if you're not playing your role and you're a bit difficult to deal with and your ego gets the better of you, then you pretty quickly get shown the door. So, yeah, it's not really, there's not too much conflict going on in terms of that. But yeah, it is a really interesting sport. It's quite complicated in that regard. Like the dynamics of how to win, and just the fact that you have 22 teams that on the start line and only one rider will take the trophy. It becomes a difficult game to master. But also that's what makes it so interesting as a rider and as a fan of the sport. So.
You've all got different characteristics. So you all get on well, do you? Or you try and get on well for the sake of the team?
No, I mean, everyone has the utmost respect for each other because we all know the work involved in order to get to where we need to be, and also the sacrifice involved, and also just the risks that we take in races is huge. And so naturally, all the riders have a very high level of respect for each other. So there's no big internal rivalries that create a storm in the team bus or anything. I mean, it has happened before, but I've never seen it personally. And maybe sometimes a rider won't do his job to the level required in order to help another rider to get a result, and maybe that will be crucial in order for that rider's performance. And sometimes after the race, there'll be a few words spoken, but you know, um, they're the top athletes in the world, so they can get pretty fiery. But that always fizzes out after a while, and it's all fine by dinner. But yeah, does that answer that? I think I did.
Oh yeah, no, you did. You answer it any way you like.
Yeah.
Is there still a stigma, do you think, in the sport in regard to taking banned substances?
Yeah.
Plagued the sport for a long time, particularly with one of its most high-profile people in Lance Armstrong. Do you still believe that the sport is reeling a bit from that, or do you feel that it is finally starting to overcome that?
No, if I was becoming a pro cyclist 10 years ago, uh, well, no, 20 years ago, I wouldn't do it purely for this reason because it was still uh, a bit of a dirty sport, unfortunately. However, over the last 10 years, that has definitely changed. And I can say with most certainty that everything I've observed and heard and seen firsthand, that it's definitely a clean sport. Okay, every now and again, there's a few athletes that get pinged, but that's for their own personal doing. That isn't from some sort of coordination with a team doctor like the way it used to be. But yeah, the testing these days in cycling is so comprehensive that you actually just can't get away with anything. You hear of Olympians, of elite runners getting tested like twice a year, maybe. But in cycling, the best cyclists are getting tested 3 times a week.
Wow.
So yeah, I know like in last year I was tested over 25 times. So like you actually just from the science point of view, you can't get away with it. And the only time these days that you hear stories of guys doing silly things is normally someone who's in a difficulty at the end of their career where they're trying to work out how to get good enough and keep supporting their family. So that's the only common story you hear these days. But at the top of the sport, it's certainly clean.
Do
So
you find that invasive? I mean, 25 times a year, or you just got used to it in the end?
it's pretty normal. I mean, uh, It's a bit strange. Like I have to give my overnight. I mean, something that people don't know is that I'm on a thing called whereabouts, which is what most elite endurance athletes are on, where you have to provide your overnight address every night, and you have to give an hour window of every day in order for testing to come to your door and do the testing. So every morning at 6 a.m. I have my location set for my home, and if I go to a hotel, I have to change that location, and then they can come and test. So honestly, when they come and test, it's a good thing because I know that if I'm getting tested, then other guys are, and I'm not just putting in all this work to get beaten by someone who's been cheating. So um, yeah, I think it's good when it happens. It's a bit strange when you have a stranger come with a briefcase to your home, and they're there for half an hour taking blood and urine. But yeah, it's part of the sport. So I actually wish that more sports had better testing because in cycling it's really comprehensive, but if you compare it to a lot of other elite sports, it's hardly existent.
Now, you won a stage at the Tour of Belgium, which was fantastic, but then injuries got in the way, and then your time in your professional team ended. I mean, how disappointing is that? And is it unfair, or is that just the way it is?
It's just the way the game is. Um, yeah, it's the way history has shown it goes and the way it'll continue to go. I mean, in cycling, at least in my case, I had two really big crashes on my contract year. And so I broke my pelvis, shoulder, jaw, ribs. Um, and so essentially, as an athlete, your team owner doesn't know if you're going to be the athlete that you were at that. And so, um, yeah, they're just not going to take the punt on whether you're going to be good enough again. So, um, yeah, it's just how it rolls in this sport. If something bad happens on your contract year and you don't have years of results behind you, then they'll just pick the next guy coming through instead of yourself. So, um, yeah, it's pretty cutthroat in that way. You see lots of riders' careers, some of the best riders in the world, they'll have some years where they're uh, up for contract and struggling to find a job. Yeah, I wish cycling wasn't like that. Um, but it also makes it, when you do get that contract, it makes it even more satisfying because you really deserve it. But yeah, it's an absolute savage game in that regard, chasing contracts. And if you get injured, you know, injuries are quite common and crashes are super common in cycling. So the chance of having a big fall on your contract year is quite high. And it's from my own personal experience, it's not something that was nice to have to put up with and also just accept. It's challenging, mentally very difficult. And you get to the end of that year and you have your agent trying to find jobs, and some teams will show some interest, but you don't know how genuine, and you don't really know how genuine is until you sign the piece of paper. So yeah, it's a stressful environment in that regards, and the job security in cycling is super low unless you're one of the best in the world, unless you're one of the top 30. But yeah, it certainly, this whole experience with the contract stuff during that period, I grew up a lot and matured and kind of appreciated a few other things going on in life. And yeah, you definitely learn to deal with resilience, which is something that, yeah, at the time was very difficult, but something that I benefit from as an athlete, but also as a person. Like something that I've learned through these years with the contract stresses and stuff is will make me a better person for whatever I do after sport. So,
So when
yeah.
you broke your pelvis in your contract year, you knew you were in trouble in regard to staying with that team for the next year.
I didn't know exactly. The team boss at the time was saying that everything was going to be okay and that I would have a contract renewal. However, things can change pretty quick. There can be new riders that come onto the market, and then all of a sudden, um, there's other guys that he can sign, and then that sentence becomes, yeah, not the case pretty quickly. So, um, normally contracts are signed in September. Like after the Tour de France, you have the summer, and things are kind of starting um, to get spoken about, and then normally it's finally organized at the end of August or September. And if you don't have a contract after at the end of September, then you're really in a bit of a pickle. And so that's where you're talking to other teams, other managers. Um, but yeah, in that year with my crashes, there was no one willing to double down on me and to back me. But that's when I then said to myself, okay, well, if I can't get the contract, luckily I have the Australian National Championships in January, a month after that contract finishes, and if I win that thing, then in theory I should be able to go pro again and get back on the books on a team. So that was my approach, and I nearly pulled it off.
But you were able to get back in a team, weren't you?
Yeah, in the end, I was back in an Australian continental team, so it's like a semi-professional team,
Yes.
and so I was able to race, but I wasn't racing at the top of the sport, and that's where I wanted to be. So it was back. I went back down a level, but it was also a stepping stone to go back up. So I need to get another result in that team to show that I was back at my athletic ability that I had before. And yeah, I came second in the Australian road race, and then I also won the Santos Festival of Cycling, which was the 2022 Tour Down Under. And so that was, I thought, enough to go pro, but there just wasn't the space in teams. Like there were some teams interested, however, they were full, so they had 30 riders on the roster, and they couldn't put another guy on. So yeah, it gets a bit tricky in that situation, but um, yeah.
Is it disappointing to be told porcupines, lies, Jimmy, when, as you said,
Yeah,
there an owner said, oh, well, you've suffered the injury, but you'll be all right. And then, of course, it all changes. Or is that just the sport? You just move on. You seem very pragmatic about all that stuff.
yeah. I mean, it's a reflection on the sport and how much it changes, and just the way the amount of young guys going through, like a rider in a situation like that doesn't have any security. Um, and there's some team bosses that hold their word and are super clear really early on in the season. But there's only a few of those guys left at the top level. So yeah, it's just part of the job that I signed up for. It's not the comfort of an office job. So I can't complain if I crash my bike and it's on contract year because that's the gig the gig that I'm part of. So that was my approach anyway. 'Cause if you start feeling sorry for yourself, then good luck trying to get back in the industry because it's not going to happen if you lose your head over it. So
So when did you come to the decision that it's time to pull the pin on the pro cycling career and become a triathlete? Has it been a long time in the making?
well, at the end of that EF contract, so at the end of 2021, and in the process of trying to work out what I was doing that next year, I did have a lot of people say, "Oh, Jimmy, you should go into triathlon. You'd be really good, like ridiculously good." And yeah, I knew I could swim okay, and obviously with my former running background and then my riding, and then people also know my work ethic and everything else involved. In order to be good at a sport like that at that level, I did have a lot of coaches and athletes say, "Hey, you should think about doing this." And I didn't really think about it too seriously because I wanted to still be a road cyclist at that time, and that was my passion. So I stayed with that, and I'm glad I did because I still race for another 2 years, or 3 years, um, and yeah, now halfway through this year, like, I mean, long story short, I was on the Australian team, and then I raced in Portugal the year after on a Portuguese team, which I had a great time, and I won a big race in Portugal, which meant that I could go back to the big pro stuff this year. And I was finally back in at the biggest races in the world, finally back where I wanted to be. And then in March or April, I actually didn't wasn't enjoying it as much as I thought, and I also had a few crashes again, and saw the risks of the sport again. And cycling is such a dangerous sport. And I think sometimes the average cycling fan doesn't appreciate the risks that the riders take in order to do the job that they're doing. Um, and yeah, I spent a month up at altitude this year and went to my biggest race of the year and got involved in a nasty crash on stage one in France, and was in hospital again and back in a hotel during the season, all bandaged up, stitches and everything. And I thought, well, I'm not actually where I want to be right now, which was a really weird feeling because I was where I thought I wanted to be. Um, and yeah, I got back home here in Barcelona, had a week to think about things and started thinking about the triathlon, around the numbers on it all, the stuff that I needed to do, the training, what I would need to do in the running and the swimming, and thought, okay, well, if I can get some backing from some people who also believe in me, then I think I should just do it. Um, Close my cycling career and transition into triathlon. So here we are, and that's what I'm doing now. So um, yeah,
Now, you said that there's a lot of crashes in cycling, but there's also going to be a lot of crashes in the cycling leg of the triathlon as well. So, how do you sort of overcome that mentally, knowing that it could happen in the middle leg of
yeah,
the triathlon after swimming and then, of course, with running to come?
yeah. I mean, in triathlon, it's far safer because in road cycling you have a peloton of 180 guys all grouped together on a tiny little piece of road, and one rider hits a pothole on a poorly maintained French street, and all of a sudden you have 70 guys down. You have 12 broken pelvises, four collarbones. You don't have that in triathlon, and you're also not going down crazy descents for 25 minutes at 100 plus k an hour, hoping that your tire doesn't blow out. Um, I mean, sadly, road cycling has seen 6 deaths in the last year
Okay.
at competitions. And so if you compare that with any other sport in the world, it doesn't. Like, it's actually crazy. Like the risks. I mean, as an athlete, you kind of ignore the risks in order to participate in the job that you're doing. Um, but there's some riders, like in my case, who after a few crashes, they can't accept or ignore the risks involved in what they're doing. And so you need to move on and do something else. So um, yeah, in triathlon, like it's certainly a lot safer. You're riding by yourself, and you don't have that race dynamics of being in a big peloton. Like it's much safer. So yeah, the problem in the road cycling was the crashes were more or less out of my control. Whereas in triathlon, I can be in control of my own bike and not have too many external factors influencing that.
And I suppose, too, knowing you're a good runner as well, you can pace yourself a bit, can't you? If you know that there's someone who's an excellent cyclist and maybe not a great runner, you can sort of just keep an eye on where they are and then go for breaking the running side of it, isn't it? As you say, a little bit more spaced
Exactly.
out in your cycling aspect of the triathlon compared to obviously just doing road cycling where you're going hammer and tong the whole way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been working out all the tactics of the sport, and basically, the most simple way to win a triathlon is to outrun the person in first place. And if you can be a good bike rider, and if I can be capable in the swimming, come out of the transition within reaching distance of the front of the race on the bike, then I will have a strong enough bike leg for sure, and then hopefully come home with a medal in the run. So yeah, I think I could be quite good and quite successful, and luckily I have the support of quite a few people and companies that are involved with the process now that'll get announced at the end of the year. So yeah, that's one thing that's different with cycling is that in triathlon, the business model is in cycling, all I need to do was chase a piece of paper and that would pay me like a normal job. But in triathlon, you have to put together all the sponsors, you have to put together, yeah, all the equipment, and whether these sponsors are providing product or financial support. It's quite an expensive sport to be a pro, so you need everything. You need all the support you can get. So I've been putting that together recently and actually enjoying kind of feeling like I'm running my own business in a way, which has been a satisfying process to be a part of.
And how's all that going? Are you getting much support, many nibbles at this stage, or is it a bit early?
No, it's quite good. I mean, my story is quite unique. Like pro cyclist going so
Yeah.
aggressively into pro triathlon. And so I'm fortunate that I launched my social media announcement last week, and it got a huge following. And a lot of people were uh, messaging from the cycling world and the triathlon world. Unfortunately, a lot of companies saw the hype about it all, and now I'm starting to get the support of good products and good people and good companies. So I have to be proactive, and for the first time, like having to do, Zoom meetings and emails and you know, uh, performance targets and costs, and it's all this stuff. But yeah, I'm quite lucky that yeah, as I said, my story is different. So there's quite a few people that want to be part of the process and see if I can succeed. So yeah, it's going well. It would be good to have a few more personal Australian sponsors on board, but I'm still teeing all of that up at the moment. So um, work in progress.
Well, this is one of the most popular sporting podcasts in Australia and around the world, Jimmy. So you're on board,
Mhm.
mate. Obviously, with lots of family. Hopefully, they'll all be listening
Yeah.
or watching, and we can get more support. Jimmy Whelan is my guest. He's on the path to becoming a successful international triathlete after an outstanding career as a pro road cyclist and also as a runner in his junior days and also at school. So you spoke about being a capable swimmer. How much swimming have you done at a competitive level, particularly open water swimming, which is obviously where a lot of the swimming occurs in a triathlon league?
Yeah, I haven't done much. So I'll do some swimming every now and again when I was injured as a runner when I was younger. And I knew I was capable in the pool. Like I have good technique and everything. Um, but I haven't done competitive swimming as such. Um, However, before I made this call to contact my boss saying that I'm not a cyclist anymore and I'm going to do triathlon, I went to a few of the pools here in Barcelona and had a few people look at my technique and yeah, just to see if I can actually be efficient in the water. And turns out I'm actually quite good in the pool. So when I worked that out, I thought, okay, well, if I have my technique dialed and I'll apply my training ethic to the swimming, then I should be quite good. And it's as simple as that, at least in my brain anyway. But I'm now at a swim squad here in Barcelona. So last night I did a bit under 4,000 meters in the pool with some guys that are pretty good swimmers. So yeah, got my head kicked in, but it's a good feeling. So swimming's not quite as enjoyable as the riding. You don't get to, see some nice views or anything, but it's definitely good for your body. I really noticed that, yeah, my lower back feels a lot stronger than normal and these things. But yeah, I guess back to the question, I haven't done any swimming competitions as such, but I have uh, worked out like the numbers that I need to do in the pool in terms of every like 100 meters, and I tried them out in the pool, and I've got a little bit of work to do, but I think I can be okay.
How many races do you plan to compete in a year?
Well, that's the cool thing about triathlon. Like in the cycling game, you have a boss telling you what races you're going to, and you have a pretty strict road calendar, and so you're always doing the same races throughout the year, and it's pretty full on, and you don't really have a time to stop to breathe. Whereas in triathlon, you have races all around the world, and you have pro races more or less every weekend, and in Europe, maybe every second weekend. So depending on how my body pulls up, you can race. I'll be specializing in half Ironmans initially, so 70.3s, and I could race once a month, for example. And yeah, we'll see. Maybe, for example, I get into a really good condition. I can go offline for 2 months, go train at altitude, and then I can do 3 races back to back, really close together, and make the most of the form. Um, but it's different for each athlete. So some athletes get really exhausted from going to races, and so they race quite rarely. But also, races are an important part of triathlon because a big part of the income is prize money. So if I do all the training and I get myself to a standard that can win, I want to be going to races. So I'll try and go to as many as I can. So you can race in America, you can race in Europe. Like being based in Barcelona is perfect because you can travel anywhere really fast. Um, but my first race for the moment will be in Melbourne, the Geelong 70.3 on March 22nd. Um, so I've got a bit of work. I've got 5 months, bit under 5 months. And yeah, so and then I'll go to Valencia for my first race in Europe. That'll be in April. So, and with the ultimate goal at the end of the season being the World Championships in Spain, the 70.3 Ironman World Championships in November.
Have you started practicing the transitioning aspect from one discipline to the next? I find that fascinating. And if you don't get that right, it can put you behind
Mm.
the eight ball, can't it?
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. I mean, people say it's like it can be simple to learn. I just need to spend some time in a car park, basically bring all my stuff, practice. Yeah, pulling off the wetsuit, for example, and getting onto the bike. It's all kind of more or less simple stuff, but definitely need to be efficient with it all. That's for sure. Winning can be a matter of seconds. So if you're faffing around with a wetsuit that you can't take off properly, then you're losing some precious time that might end up being the difference between winning or not. So yeah.
Well, it's not easy pulling off a wetsuit, is it? We saw Ian Thorpe tell a great story about the 2000 Sydney Olympics where they couldn't get the wetsuit on that he needed for the relay after being in a previous race, and he wasn't even there when they were announcing the team, and he eventually came out, I think, in a pretty wet wetsuit as they were trying to go from one wetsuit to the next. So, I mean, it's probably going to be easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, these days the wetsuit technology is quite good. So I know there's triathlon specific wetsuits. I know if you're swimming in some of the thermal stuff that the guys used to use, yeah, watching them trying to rip it off would be quite challenging. But yeah, the technology and the stuff in the clothing these days that are triathlon specific, it's pretty incredible. Um, but I've watched some videos of the pros, coming out of the water, and it's not easy. So, and they do it really quick. So, um, yeah, something that I need to iron out at a car park, and find my technique for it for sure.
And you've mapped out a plan, James. I've been watching your stuff on social media. It's outstanding. That's how I found out that you were making the decision to move from pro cycling to triathlons, that you'd love to compete for Australia in the 2028 LA Olympics. Now, that is less than 4 years away, and you haven't even done a race yet. Uh,
Yep.
that would be fantastic if you could do it. How confident are you can do it?
Well, I mean, my dream as a kid was to always go to the Olympics, and as a runner, I thought that that was my lofty long-term goal. And now that I'm punching this ticket into triathlon, I want this to be a priority of mine and see if I can do it. I mean, first I need to focus on my first year and my second year as a pro in 70.3 middle distance Ironman triathlons. But if I can prove myself in this distance, then I think I can transition to the shorter stuff quite nicely, um, in the aim to become an Olympian. Um, and I think having a goal like that is really important because, um, yeah, it's just Olympics is bigger than sport, and it's something that I want to achieve as an athlete. You put all these years of work in, and you want to say that you're an Olympian. It kind of transcends. Everyone knows the Olympics. So, yeah, I think I could do it, but first I just need to focus on the first 3 months, and then the next 6 months, and then the years after that, and then we can see from there where my swimming's at. Because in short course Olympic distance, so the swimming is more important than middle distance.
Mm.
Uh, so if you come out of the swim in the Olympics and you're not in that front group, then the bike riders have a peloton to ride away from you, and you can never get back to the race. Whereas in middle distance triathlon, it's non-drafting, so you don't have that peloton dynamic. So you really do, as an Olympian wanting to be in the Olympic distance, if you want to be a good triathlete, you have to be at the front of the swim. So um, I think also the running leg is 10K, and that distance actually suits me just as well as the half distance, the half marathon. So we'll see. I mean, there's lots of unanswered questions, and there'll be some guys looking at that video that I put out saying, I want to try and win a race next year and be an Olympian. There'll be some guys watching this with a lot of interest because some people probably will think that I can't do it. But that's also the enjoyment in sport, is to make lofty goals and try to pull it off. So, and to put the pressure on. So,
You've always wanted to prove people wrong, haven't you? And you've always
yeah,
been
and I've done it a few
to
times
do
now.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
Where do you get that mindset from? Both
I have
parents?
no, I have no idea. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's something you're born with. It's also can be a little bit environmental from home, but I don't think my parents don't quite have this. Maybe they do, and they just, I mean, the cool thing in sport is that it really can bring out these emotions and like this kind of these personalities, which is something that normal everyday life doesn't really provide, I guess. So it's kind of nice to be able to um, have these goals that make you feel alive, and yeah, it puts the performance pressure on a little bit. So
And you see yourself
yeah,
based in Barcelona. I saw some photos on Facebook recently. I dare say your sisters Sarah and Isabel would love you to be based in Europe. You've got somewhere to stay, Jimmy.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, they both came earlier in yeah, a few months ago, and mum and dad as well. I mean, I love it here. And these days, with the calendar being mostly in Europe, yeah, you have to have a European base. So the Americans have to come and train in Europe, and also the Australians as well. So um, yeah, Barcelona is my home, and I'm loving it here. You have the sea to do all the swimming. You have great pools. Um, you have the mountains right at the foot. Like Barcelona is quite similar to Adelaide in that you have the city kind of is the beginning of the mountain, and you roll up into the hills, and you have good mountain ranges. So it's really quite a nice place to train, and the weather's always good. I mean, the one thing that Barcelona doesn't have is the swim culture of Australia. So you don't have these elite swim squads in every pool. So finding a swim squad was quite challenging, but I found one, so that's good. Um, but yeah, it's a beautiful place to call home, and hopefully I can have it, yeah, be a place for my friends and family to come stay when I'm training all day, every day.
Have you finished your degree, James, in urban planning?
No, I haven't. So that's on hold. For the moment, I've got a year and a half left. So uh, I'm on the elite athlete program, which enables me to come back to it whenever I want. Um, so that's quite lucky to have that agreement with RMIT, because otherwise it would have been, yeah, I would have washed away my degree in a normal circumstance. But yeah, it's something that I thought I could do alongside my cycling initially, but I found the amount of time and the investment that you need to put into the sport was so huge that if I did anything else outside of it, I'd get a bit overwhelmed. And so I've just kept it in the distance. And so it's still there, and I still will possibly finish it, but we'll see. Yeah, for the moment, I'll focus on my sporting ideas. Yeah.
Which is fantastic. And as I let you go, and I really appreciate your time, is there an athlete that inspires you, keeps you going?
Uh, yeah, there is. There's a cyclist who was a teammate of mine. I mean, when I was coming through sport, through running and through cycling when I was younger, I didn't have someone specifically that I looked up to. Um, uh, but now that I'm a cyclist, there was a teammate of mine, a Canadian cyclist called Michael Woods. Um, he lives quite close to me here, and we would train together, and we spent a fair bit of time together. And he kind of taught me everything that he's learnt, and I've learnt a lot of my work ethic from him. And this mentality of like, why can't you do something? If you have close enough the talent and you can put the work in, then why can't you do something? And he definitely has that mentality, and maybe that's where I get this whole idea from. Um, like, yeah, he had a whole bunch of people that told him that he was crazy doing what he did. He transitioned to cycling super late and took some big risks in order to do that. And a lot of people said that what he was doing was nuts and was a waste of time. And now he's one of the world's best cyclists, winning some of the biggest races every year. And when I told him that I was doing this new idea with triathlon, and he saw that I wasn't where I wanted to be in road cycling. He said, "This is awesome." He said that, yeah, he said knowing my work ethic and everything, and then also he knows my running ability, that he knows that I could be quite good. So he's pretty excited for me. But yeah, my role model for sure is definitely Michael Woods, the Canadian cyclist for Israel Premier Tech. He's 36 years old, I think. But yeah, that's probably the closest I have to a role model.
Excellent. Well, Jimmy, thanks so much for giving us so much time and going through your story. You're an inspiration to the entire family, no doubt to your mum and dad and your sisters Isabel and Sarah, and of course your uncles and the extended family and the entire Whelan clan and all your friends and everyone. Great success as a cyclist, great success as a junior runner, and now you're combining those two with swimming to become very successful, we hope, a triathlete, and hopefully get the opportunity to represent Australia at the Olympic Games and World Championships. I really appreciate you giving us so much time, and hopefully we'll get to catch up at one of those big Whelan gatherings around Christmas time when you're here in Australia in a couple of months' time. And thanks for joining us on Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, cheers for the chat. That was nice.